everyone. This week we're going to be working on making connections while we're reading. When you're making connections while reading a story, it's important to make sure that the connection is helping you understand what you're reading. So it's not just, oh, I know someone who's got that name, or oh, I've been to the beach before. It's about understanding how a character feels. Most of the time, our connections, especially if they're text to text or text to self, you're going to understand how the character feels because you have felt that way before. So I'm going to show you by reading this book right here called When the Relatives Came. It was in the summer of the year when the relatives came. They came up from Virginia. They left with their grapes, were nearly purple enough to pick, but not quite. They had an old station wagon that smelled like a real car, but in it they put an ice chest full of soda pop and some boxes of crackers and some bologna sandwiches, and up they came from Virginia. And they left at 4 in the morning when it was still dark, before even the birds were awake. They drove all day long and into the night, and while they traveled along, they looked at the strange houses and different mountains, and they thought about their almost purple grapes back home. They thought about Virginia, but they thought about us too, waiting for them. And I have a connection to this, so I can understand how they feel, because when I was a kid growing up, we used to take road trips to visit my dad's side of the family in Utah, and we packed up the car, we loaded everyone up, and there was a lot of excitement the whole ride as we were going to visit my family. So I understand how the characters in this car feel. They're thinking about back home, but they're also excited about where they're going. So that helps me understand the story. So they drank up all their soda pop and ate up all their crackers and traveled up all those miles until finally they pulled into our yard. Then it was hugging time. Talk about hugging. Those relatives just passed us all around their car, pulling us against their wrinkled Virginia clothes, crying sometimes. They hugged us for hours. Then it was into the house, and so much laughing and shining faces and hugging in doorways. You'd have to go through at least 4 different hugs to get from the kitchen to the front room. Those relatives. And again, I have a connection to this part because when we finally got to where we were going, I know exactly how that feels. I know how excited my family was to see us and how many hugs and how just everyone was so excited to see each other because it had been so long. So I understand how these characters feel because I have felt that way before. So my connection is helping me understand what I'm reading. And finally, after a big supper, 2 or 3 times around until we all got a turn at the table, there was quiet talk, and we were in 2s and 3s throughout the house. The relatives weren't particular about beds, which was good since there weren't any extras, so a few squeezed in with us, and the rest slept on the floor, some with their arms thrown over the closest person, and some with their arms across one person and legs across another. It was different going to sleep with all that new breathing in the house. And I actually have a connection to this too. I was just in California visiting my family. We kind of went through this whole thing, and we were all smashed in my grandma's house, and there were people sleeping in the living room, and there were people sleeping in, my whole little family was all sleeping in one room, and normally we have 3 different bedrooms at home, so I understand this being squeezed in and just kind of crowding in together, and how that must feel and sound different to the person writing the story. These relatives stayed for weeks and weeks. They helped us tend the garden, they fixed any broken things they could find. They ate up all our strawberries and melons and then promised we could eat up all their grapes and peaches when we came to Virginia. But none of us thought about Virginia much. We were so busy hugging each other and eating and breathing together. Finally, after a long time, the relatives loaded up their ice chest and headed back to Virginia at 4 in the morning. We stood there in our pajamas and waved them off in the dark. We watched the relatives disappear down the road. Then we crawled back into our beds that felt too big and too quiet, and we fell asleep. I understand that feeling of when everyone's gone and all of a sudden your house feels really empty, and you kind of get used to having everyone around and used to being around those people, and it feels different to have it back to normal. And the relatives drove on all day long and into the night. And while they traveled along, they looked at the strange houses and different mountains, and they thought about their dark purple grapes waiting at home in Virginia. But they thought about us too, missing them, and they missed us. And when they were finally home from Virginia, they crawled into their silent, soft beds and dreamed about next summer. So this week, I want you, when you're reading, to try to make some text-to-self connections. That's when you have a connection to yourself. You might make a text-to-text connection when you have one story. The story you're reading reminds you of another story you've read, and that helps you understand that. Or a text-to-world connection, which might be a TV show or something that's going on in the world around you. But always make sure that when you make your connections, so in your videos, you need to say, I have a connection to, tell me the part you have a connection to, and then tell me, and it helps me understand the story because, and tell me the part that it helps you understand. Okay, good luck.